What would you do if your own child stood by and watched you drown for money? I never thought I'd ask that question out loud, yet here I am, 64 years old, living in New York, telling you the moment my entire world split apart. It started as a perfect day. The sky over the Hudson was streaked in gold, the water calm like glass. My son had invited me for what he called a family outing. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe that he still saw me as more than a burden. So I dressed in my best linen dress, wrapped a scarf around my shoulders, and told myself, Diana, maybe things are getting better. You know that whisper of hope you hold on to even when every sign says otherwise? That was me. The yacht smelled of champagne and new money. Vanessa, my daughter-in-law, smiled too wide, her lipstick flawless, her nails gleaming like claws. She poured me a glass, but her eyes never warmed. My son Daniel avoided my gaze. He laughed too loud at her jokes, and when his hand brushed hers, it felt rehearsed. I should have noticed. Shouldn't a mother notice? The music was low, a jazz record humming through the speakers. The wind tangled my hair, and I leaned on the railing, letting the chill bite my skin. For one brief second, I felt free. Free from the hospital bills, from the whispers that maybe I was losing my memory, free from being treated like a fragile ornament nobody wanted. And then, it happened. Vanessa stepped close, too close. Her perfume, sharp and sweet, filled my nose. She whispered, almost kindly, "It's nothing personal, Diana." Her hand shoved hard against my shoulder. The railing vanished beneath me, the sky flipped, and then the water swallowed me whole. Cold, so cold it cut through my chest like knives. The shock stole my breath. I kicked, arms flailing, dress dragging me down like an anchor. Above me, the boat didn't stop. Didn't even slow. Do you know the sound of betrayal? It's silence. Silence when the person you gave life to doesn't scream your name, doesn't throw a rope, doesn't jump in after you. I saw them, just for a second, through burning eyes. My son, standing still, Vanessa gripping his arm, and his face blank. I wanted to scream, "Daniel, it's your mother!" But the river filled my mouth, bitter, choking. The stakes were clear. Not just money, $3 billion of inheritance I had protected all my life, but respect, dignity, the love I thought was unbreakable. Have you ever realized in one instant that your family values wealth more than you? That's the kind of heartbreak that kills before the water does. Darkness pressed in. My lungs begged for air. Part of me thought, maybe this is it. Maybe this is how it ends. Tossed away like an old coat, forgotten at the bottom of the river. But another part of me, stubborn, fierce, refused. Not like this. Not today. You see, when you're drowning, every second stretches. The cold whispers lies. Give up. It's easier. But there's also a fire inside that screams, fight. I clawed at the water, desperate, terrified. The yacht moved farther away, the hum of its engine fading. My body screamed for oxygen. My mind screamed louder, "Daniel, why?" And here's the question I can't stop asking you, because I know you're listening. If your own child betrayed you for money, would you still call them family? That was my breaking point. That was my defining fall. And if you think this is already shocking, wait until you hear what happened when I came back. Because yes, I came back, and I wasn't alone. Stay with me. The water should have killed me. It clawed at my chest, pulled me under, filled my mouth with bitterness and salt. The Hudson is not forgiving. It's heavy, it's black. And in that moment, it felt endless. I thrashed. My arms went weak, my legs burned, my scarf tangled around me like a rope trying to drag me down. And my thoughts, loud, sharp, kept circling back to one thing. So this is how it ends. Alone, betrayed, forgotten. But then, a sound, a motor, low, rumbling, cutting through the silence above the waves. Have you ever been so close to giving up that even the faintest noise feels like a miracle? That was me. A small boat came into view, its single lantern slicing the dark. I wanted to scream, but the river had stolen my voice. I could only wave one trembling arm before the current shoved me under again. I remember the light wobbling, searching, then fixing on me. And then a voice, rough, urgent. "Hold on." A splash. Hands, calloused, strong, grabbed at me, hauling me upward. My lungs burned as air ripped back in, each breath like fire. I coughed, choked, gasped, clung to those arms as if they were the only real thing left in the world. The man dragged me into the boat, laying me across the wooden planks slick with river spray. My body shivered uncontrollably, every nerve screaming. He covered me with an old coat that smelled of diesel and sea salt. "You're alive," he muttered, more to himself than to me. His accent was thick, his hair graying under the lantern light. His name, I'd later learn, was Jake, a fisherman. Just a man finishing his long night shift. But in that moment, he was everything. I stared up at the black sky, stars blurry with tears, and whispered the first words that made sense. "They wanted me gone." Jake paused. He didn't ask who. He didn't ask why. He just looked at me, eyes narrowing, as if he'd heard stories like mine before. And maybe he had. I tried to sit up, but dizziness slammed me back down. My chest rattled with every cough. He steadied me, then handed me a flask of water. "Drink slow," he said. "You're safe now." Safe. Such a fragile word. Safe meant I was alive, but safe also meant no one knew. Not my neighbors, not the police. My family thought I was gone, and that gave them power. Have you ever realized that surviving doesn't mean you're living? That was me, shivering on that boat, alive but erased. The yacht was gone, my son and daughter-in-law celebrating, thinking they had won. And me? I was a ghost. A woman whose name was about to be carved into stone while her body kept breathing. Do you know what it feels like to know the world has already written your ending? It's suffocating, but it's also liberating, because when everyone believes you're dead, you have only one choice left: decide what to do with the second chance. Jake looked at me again, measuring, and asked quietly, "Do you want me to call someone?" I shook my head. My teeth still chattered, but my answer was firm: "No, not yet." Why? Because if I returned too soon, they'd find another way. If they thought they'd succeeded, I had time. Time to see the truth. Time to decide how to fight back. And so, that night, as the boat drifted toward the docks, I made a vow. I didn't know how. I didn't know who I could trust. But I knew this: I would not stay dead. Here's the thing. You might think drowning is the worst part. It's not. The worst part is rising back up and realizing the life you had is gone. That everything familiar, your home, your son, your name, has been stolen. But maybe, just maybe, that's also the gift. Because if your old life is gone, you can build a new one. Stronger, smarter, dangerous in a way they never saw coming. And if you think being pushed into a river is the end of this story, stay with me. It was only the beginning. Do you know what it feels like to attend your own funeral? Not a metaphor, not a dream. I mean standing in the back of a church, heart pounding in your chest, watching people weep over a coffin they think contains your body. That was me, Diana. 64 years old, breathing, heart beating, and yet dead to the world. Jake had hidden me for a few days after pulling me from the river. His sister loaned me clothes, too big, smelling faintly of mothballs. I looked at myself in the mirror and barely recognized the face staring back. Wet hair hacked short, bruises blooming across my arms, eyes hollow, rimmed with shadows. If I was dead, then this was my ghost. And then, one morning, I opened the paper. My name was there, obituary column. Beloved mother, taken too soon, may she rest in peace. I read it twice, 3 times. My hand shook so badly I almost tore the page. They were burying me. I had to see it. Don't ask me why. Maybe I wanted proof. Maybe I wanted to look my betrayal in the eye. Or maybe I was just punishing myself. The church smelled of lilies. Too many. The kind of smell that clings to grief. The bells tolled slow, heavy, like they were marking the end of a story. I slipped in through the side door, keeping my head low, scarf pulled tight around my face. Nobody noticed the quiet woman in the back pew. And then I saw it. A coffin, polished mahogany, draped in white roses. My picture, framed, smiling, set on top. Do you know what it's like to see your own smile staring back at you from a frame? It's unreal. It's obscene. Rows of people filled the pews, neighbors, old friends, some I hadn't spoken to in years. They cried real tears. They whispered prayers. They believed the lie. And at the front, my son Daniel, wearing black, hand in hand with Vanessa. His face carefully arranged in grief. Too carefully. He dabbed his eyes at the right moments, sighed at the right words, squeezed Vanessa's hand just so. A performance. A theater of mourning. For a mother he tried to drown, my stomach twisted. I wanted to scream, "I'm here! I'm alive! Look at me!" But I couldn't, because if I did, they would win again. I remember a flashback. Daniel as a boy, maybe 7, running up the steps of this same church with scraped knees. He clung to my hand and asked, "Mom, will you always protect me?" And I had promised. Now, years later, he stood there pretending to bury me, protecting nothing but his greed. The priest's voice echoed. She was a woman of strength, of sacrifice, of love for her family.
Pertate porto lissipado a cidoi la te ettu.
The words cut deep. They were talking about me, as if I were gone, while the truth, the brutal truth, sat silent inside me.
Un tato che di gento.
And the stakes echoed in my mind, not just the fortune,
Divendo o la Bruggese.
not just the $3 billion they were scheming to steal, but my dignity, my name, my legacy. If they succeeded, I wasn't just dead, I was erased. Have you ever realized you are both invisible and unforgettable at the same time? That was me. As the choir sang, I noticed something else. Vanessa's hand never let go of Daniel's arm. She leaned in, whispering, smiling when no one looked, smiling at a funeral, at my funeral. That smile told me everything. They thought they'd won. They thought the money, the estate, the freedom was finally theirs. And in that smile, I found something I hadn't felt since the river. Fire. I wasn't going to let them bury me twice. When the coffin was carried down the aisle, people sobbed, crossing themselves, reaching out to touch the wood. I stayed in the shadows, fists clenched, watching, waiting, recording every detail in the prison of my memory. And then I walked away, quiet, unseen, but alive. That day, I made another vow. If they believed I was dead, I would use it. I would move like a ghost. I would watch. I would gather proof. And one day, I would return. Because here's the truth. A funeral isn't the end. Sometimes it's the beginning of something far more dangerous. And if you think this death was the most painful moment, stay with me. You haven't yet seen what came next. Do you know what it feels like to read a piece of paper that tells the world your mind is broken, when you know, crystal clear, it isn't? That was me. I remember the first time I saw it. Jake had slipped an envelope into my trembling hands late at night, his face pale, lips pressed tight. I opened it. Inside were neatly typed medical records, stamped, signed. The words leapt off the page. Patient, Diana Collins. Age, 64. Diagnosis, advanced Alzheimer's disease. I froze. My breath caught in my throat. Alzheimer's? Me? I could still recite my childhood phone number, still recall the smell of my mother's perfume, still feel every stab of betrayal from that night on the yacht. My memory was sharp, my rage sharper. And yet, here it was, black ink on white paper, carrying the weight of authority. A lie dressed up as truth. I flipped through page after page, dates, doctor's notes, even a so-called MRI scan, grainy, stamped with my name. They had thought of everything. My son, my only son, had gone so far as to forge my mind into dust. Have you ever had your sanity stolen on paper? I felt like I was disappearing all over again. First the yacht, then the coffin. Now this, erased not by water or wood, but by ink. I could almost hear Daniel's voice in those reports, smooth, calculated. She's not herself anymore. She can't handle the estate. She doesn't even know who we are. And suddenly, every sideways glance made sense. Every whisper I hadn't understood before. The maid who spoke slowly to me, enunciating each word like I was a child. The lawyer who avoided my questions, redirecting everything to Daniel. The little sticky notes Vanessa had started leaving on appliances, stove, fridge, bathroom, as if I couldn't recognize my own home. It was all part of the script, a theater of decay. They had staged my illness long before they staged my funeral. I gripped the papers so tightly they crumpled in my fists. The rage rose like fire, but then, fear. If these documents were accepted in court, if they convinced the banks, the lawyers, the trustees, I wasn't just dead socially, I was legally incapacitated. Everything I had worked for, $3 billion, decades of sacrifice, gone. Signed away under the name of a woman who supposedly couldn't even remember her own birthday. Do you see the stakes now? It wasn't just money. It was identity. I slammed the folder shut, hands shaking. No, I whispered to myself. They don't get to write my story. But in the quiet, another memory cut through, a flashback. Daniel at 17, head bent over a college acceptance letter. His eyes shone as he whispered, "Mom, you believed in me when nobody else did." I had framed that letter, hung it in the hallway. Now that same boy had written me out of existence. I looked at Jake. If they can do this, if they can make the world think I'm mad. My voice cracked. He didn't answer. He didn't have to. I saw the fear in his eyes. Because a forged diagnosis isn't just words. It's a weapon, one that can kill you slower than drowning, because the world smiles politely while it buries you alive. So I made myself a promise. I wouldn't just survive this lie. I would expose it, line by line, stamp by stamp, and when I returned, I would make them read their own fiction out loud, while the truth burned every word to ash. And if you think forged papers are just harmless ink, stay with me. You'll see how those lies became chains. Chains I had to break, no matter the cost. I thought I had already seen the worst of it. The yacht, the coffin, the forged diagnosis. But no, evil has layers. And the next one cut deeper than anything else. It started with a whisper. A rumor I overheard while hiding in Jake's small kitchen, the radio crackling in the background. A news anchor's voice, steady and indifferent, announcing updates about the Khan's estate, my estate.
Legal guardianship of a newborn child has been tied to the inheritance proceedings.
I froze. Newborn? Guardianship? My name and the word child in the same sentence? It made no sense. The broadcast continued. A baby boy, reportedly connected to the Collins family line, has been listed in the amended will. Full custodial rights pending transfer. I felt the blood drain from my face. A baby? In my will? How? I slammed the radio off, heart hammering in my chest. I whispered aloud, as if saying it might make it vanish. What baby? Do you see what they were doing? It wasn't enough to fake my death. It wasn't enough to erase my mind. They were manufacturing heirs, creating life or claiming it, just to tighten their grip on $3 billion. I thought back to the look on Vanessa's face at the funeral. That secretive smile. The way her hand rested protectively on her stomach for just a moment. At the time, I brushed it off as arrogance. But now? Now it felt like a clue. Was she pretending to be pregnant? Or worse, did they actually steal a child to pass off as family? The thought made me sick. My fortune, my legacy, tied up with the fate of some innocent infant? I remember staring at the ceiling that night, unable to sleep. The room smelled faintly of fish and salt. Jake's dog curled at my feet. My mind raced in circles. A baby. A baby in my will. How? And then I realized this was the hook. This was how they would keep control. Because who questions a grieving young widow with a child? Who denies a baby a future? The public would eat it up. The courts would nod with sympathy. And just like that, everything that was mine would be theirs. But here's the question that gnawed at me, the one I want to ask you. Have you ever wondered why a baby shows up suddenly in a story of greed? Doesn't that feel off? I couldn't shake it. Every instinct screamed that this child wasn't just a pawn. He was the center of a bigger scheme. The baby changed everything. And if you think money makes people cruel, wait until you see what happens when they drag an innocent child into their lies. Stay with me. Do you know what it feels like to move through your own city as if you were a ghost? That was me. I wasn't supposed to exist. I had no papers, no proof. To the world, I was already buried. And yet I was still breathing, still walking, still plotting, Jake warned me. If they find out you're alive, they'll finish the job. His voice was low, urgent. The kind of warning that makes your skin prickle. But how could I sit still? How could I let them rewrite my life? Forge babies, steal billions, and bury me under lies? No, I had to know the truth. That's when I turned to Mrs. Chen. You wouldn't notice her if you passed her on the street. A quiet widow, silver hair pulled back, hands always busy with knitting. But she had something David and Vanessa never did. Loyalty. She had known me since I was a girl. She could read the lines of a family will better than any lawyer because she'd been my father's secretary for 30 years. When I showed up at her doorstep, she'd gasped, as though she'd seen a ghost. Maybe she had. She grabbed my hands, trembling. "You're alive!" I nodded. But not for long, if they get what they want. We sat in her tiny living room, the smell of jasmine tea between us. I laid out everything I knew. The fake Alzheimer's, the funeral, the sudden appearance of a baby in my will. She listened, eyes wide, lips pressed tight. Finally, she said, "Then we find the paper trail. They can fake your death. They can fake your mind, but they cannot erase ink." That was the beginning. At night, I slipped through the back streets, scarf pulled over my hair, heart pounding each time headlights passed too close. Jake drove me once. His old truck rattling, headlights dim. "Feels like a crime film," he muttered. I didn't laugh. It was a crime film. Except this time, the villain shared my blood. Inside Mrs. Chen's old wooden desk, we started building our case. Bills, emails she'd printed, drafts of contracts she'd once copied for my son. She had kept everything, like a squirrel hiding nuts. Each page smelled of dust and ink, but to me they smelled like hope. One night, while flipping through folders, my hand froze. A receipt for a medical evaluation. My name typed neatly at the top. Neurological decline. Alzheimer's stage 2. Date, 6 months before the yacht. 6 months before I ever forgot a thing. I pressed the page to my chest. They had been planning this long before the shove. I whispered, "How do you fight a lie written in ink?" Mrs. Chen answered without hesitation.
"You don't fight it alone," she primered.
And she was right. That's when Jake introduced me to someone he trusted, Danny. At first, I thought he was just another fisherman, all rough hands and quiet eyes. But something in the way he asked questions, pointed, sharp, made me pause. He wasn't just listening, he was profiling. Later, I would learn he was more than Jake's friend. He was FBI. But at that time, all I knew was this. For the first time since I drowned and rose again, I had allies. And yet, don't think this gave me peace. Every night I walked back to the room above Jake's boathouse, I felt it. The eyes, the possibility that someone had seen me. Someone had whispered. Someone had sold me out. Because here's the truth. When billions are at stake, everyone is a suspect. I barely slept. Every creak of the wood made me jolt upright. Every knock of waves against the dock sounded like footsteps. My breath came shallow, ears straining for a sound that wasn't there. But fear kept me sharp. And sharp was exactly what I needed. I told myself again and again, find the proof, follow the trail, protect the child. Because you see, it wasn't just about me anymore. It was about that baby, that mysterious heir. If they could invent a child out of thin air, what else could they do? And if they had taken a real child, then somewhere out there was a young mother. Hurt, missing, maybe worse. That thought was enough to keep me moving, night after night, deeper into the shadows. And here's where it gets dark. Much darker than you're expecting. Stay with me. You ever open a folder and feel the air shift? Like suddenly the room is heavier, and the paper in your hand isn't just paper, it's proof. It's danger, it's betrayal, bound up in ink. That's what it felt like the night we found the files. Mrs. Chen spread them out across our kitchen table. The old wood was scratched and worn, but that night it looked like a battlefield. Stacks of contracts, receipts, medical reports, envelopes stamped with names I hadn't seen in years. My eyes darted from page to page, my pulse racing like I was chasing ghosts through paragraphs. Jake leaned against the counter, arms folded, his eyes scanning me more than the documents. He knew what this was costing me. Every line of text was another cut, another reminder that my son had turned me into a piece of paper, not a mother, not a woman, just an obstacle to erase. And then I saw it, a ledger, columns of numbers so large they didn't look real. $3 billion. Moved through offshore accounts, funneled through shell corporations I didn't recognize. I whispered the words out loud, and even my own voice sounded foreign. 3 billion? Do you know what it's like to see your family's legacy, the blood and sweat of generations, reduced to a number in a scheme you were never supposed to outlive? My stomach twisted. My hand shook so badly, the pages rattled like dry leaves. But it didn't stop there. Buried in another folder was something colder. Adoption papers. Except they weren't real. The signatures were blurred, the stamps too perfect. Like someone had run them through a printer late at night. Attached was a birth certificate. Infant, no father listed, mother's name smudged. It looked official. Until you really looked. Then it looked like murder. I remember whispering, "Who is this baby?" No one answered. Mrs. Chen slid another document toward me. A transfer of funds, millions wired to a clinic I'd never heard of. Under memo, 2 words. Neonatal care. My throat tightened. Neonatal care for who? For what? I caught Jake's eyes. If you saw your family's name on this, what would you do? My voice cracked when I said it, but I meant every word. What would you do? Because this wasn't just about money anymore. It was about a child tangled in the middle of greed, so thick it choked me. I thought back, quick flashes of memory. Vanessa, my daughter-in-law, whispering on the phone, her voice clipped, sharp. David avoiding my gaze when I asked simple questions. Late-night deliveries to the house, boxes sealed too tightly. They all clicked into place that night around Mrs. Chen's kitchen table. Under one weak bulb that buzzed like it was nervous, too. Jake slammed his hand against the counter, breaking the silence.
This isn't just fraud. This is trafficking. This is a crime scene written on paper.
His words cut through the fog. I stared down at the adoption file, my vision blurring with tears I didn't remember letting fall. Somewhere, a young mother had signed or been forced to sign away her baby. And my son, my own flesh and blood, had turned that child into a pawn for billions. You ever feel grief and rage hit you at the exact same time? It's like drowning and catching fire all at once. I wanted to scream. I wanted to claw at the walls. But instead, I sat there frozen, listening to the clock tick, every second pounding louder, like it was counting down. Mrs. Chen finally broke the silence. These documents, they could bury them, or they could save you. Depends on who holds them. I held the papers tight, my knuckles white. Then, we hold them, I whispered, and we don't let go. That night, as I walked back through the dark streets, clutching the folder to my chest, I realized something. I was no longer just a ghost hiding from my killers. I was a witness, a survivor, and maybe even the weapon they never saw coming. But the truth? I had no idea just how deep this rabbit hole would go. And what I discovered next, well, it still haunts me. There are stories you think you're prepared to hear, until you hear them. That night, in Mrs. Chen's kitchen, under that flickering bulb, I thought we'd reached the worst already. Fraud, lies, a baby hidden in forged papers. But nothing could have braced me for the truth about her. The girl who never made it out alive. Her name was Emily, 17 years old. Barely more than a child herself, Mrs. Chen had kept clippings, police notes, whispers from hospital staff who owed her favors. She spread them across the table like broken glass, and each shard cut deeper. A photo. Her face. Round, soft, framed by messy brown hair. Eyes too large for her age, like they'd seen too much too soon. She was holding a swollen belly, smiling weakly. The kind of smile you make when you're pretending you're okay because nobody around you is. The report said, complications. Complications. That's the word they use when they want you to stop asking questions, but I couldn't stop. I traced the lines of the report with my finger. Time of death, 3:17 a.m. Cause, hemorrhage. No autopsy performed. No family listed. 17 alone. Dead on a hospital bed while my son and his wife stood outside waiting, not to grieve her, not to comfort her, but to take the only thing she had left. You ever feel your chest crack in two? I could hardly breathe. Jake whispered almost to himself, "They didn't just steal money. They stole a life." And it hit me, the baby, the mysterious child in the fake adoption papers, Emily's baby. A baby born into this world as its mother slipped out of it. And my family, my blood, had turned that tiny, helpless life into a bargaining chip. Closed my eyes and saw it. Emily clutching the sheets, fighting to hold on, Nurses rushing, machines screaming, then silence. And outside, Vanessa's heels clicking on tile. David's voice, hushed, calculating. My son, my own son, do you know what it feels like to grieve for someone you never met? My tears weren't just for Emily. They were for the girl I once was. Young and scared, who carried a child into the world with nothing but hope. They were for every woman silenced by power and greed. Mrs. Chen's voice broke through. They paid off the hospital. Doctors, administrators, everyone signed. It disappeared in the system. I slammed my palm on the table. No. People don't just disappear, not at 17. The room went silent, except for the hum of the refrigerator. And in that silence, the weight of Emily's story pressed on me like a mountain. She had no voice anymore. But maybe I did. I stared at her picture again, that fragile smile, the baby she never got to hold, and I made a promise right there, whispering to a girl who'd never hear me. They won't erase you. Not while I'm still breathing. Because that's what monsters count on, isn't it? That the weak won't fight back. That the dead can't speak. That grief will keep you quiet. But grief had burned into something else inside me. Something sharper. The stakes weren't just mine anymore. This wasn't only about me surviving or reclaiming my legacy. It was about a 17-year-old mother who never stood a chance and the child she left behind. And if I had to crawl through fire to make sure her story was told, I would. I folded the papers back into the file, my hands steadier now than when I first touched them. Because the truth? The moment I saw Emily's face, the fight stopped being about money. It became about justice. And believe me, I wasn't done digging, not even close. You ever notice how sometimes the people who scare you most aren't the loud ones? They're the ones who whisper, who move pieces behind curtains. That's who she was, Miranda Torres. The name slipped into our investigation like a shadow under the door, and once I heard it, I couldn't unhear it. Mrs. Chen said it first. She was. Her voice was low, almost trembling. All of this, the papers, the money, the baby, it's protected by Miranda. Miranda Torres, the family lawyer, the woman I had trusted with contracts, wills, every signature that bound my fortune to my name. She'd been there at birthdays, holidays, offering polite smiles and ironclad advice. I used to think she was loyal, but loyalty, I learned, has a price tag, and mine had been sold. Jake pulled up files, half-buried emails, fragments of correspondence, all signed with her initials, M.T. She wasn't just cleaning up the mess. She was orchestrating it, covering hospital records, silencing witnesses, even arranging donations that looked more like bribes. And then came the detail that froze me. Miranda hadn't just handled the adoption documents. She'd been present at the hospital the night Emily died. Present. What lawyer attends a teenage mother's complication unless she wanted to ensure no questions were asked? I couldn't shake the image. Emily fighting for her life, and in the corner, Miranda in her immaculate suit, arms folded, eyes cold, already planning the paperwork for a baby whose mother wouldn't survive. You see, until that moment, I thought my son and his wife were the villains, small-time traitors, greedy for inheritance. But Miranda? She made them possible. She was the architect. The puppeteer. I asked Mrs. Chen, why her? Why would she risk everything? Mrs. Chen sighed. Because, Diana, people like Miranda don't see risk. They see control. And she controlled everything. She thought she controlled even you.
That last line. She thought she controlled even you. It lit a fire in me. I remembered sitting in her office years earlier. Dark wood panels, books stacked high, her pen gliding across pages as if the law bent to her.
I remembered her telling me where to sign, how to word my will, how to protect my legacy. And I remembered trusting her, blindly, How many times did I hand her my trust in a manila folder? How many times did she smile while tightening the noose? It made my skin crawl. Jake muttered, "She's untouchable. She's got judges in her pocket, donors on her payroll. Here's the thing. Nobody's untouchable. Not forever. Especially not when the truth is clawing its way out of the dark." I leaned back, staring at the ceiling. So it's bigger than family. Bigger than betrayal. This is a network. And in that moment, the stakes shifted again. It wasn't just about my children's greed. It was about the machinery behind them. A powerful woman who treated lives like chess pieces, who thought she could bury truth under signatures and seals. Do you know what it feels like to realize your fight is 10 times bigger than you thought? Like standing at the edge of a cliff, staring down, and realizing the ground below isn't ground at all. It's a bottomless pit. That's where I was. But instead of fear, I felt clarity. Miranda Torres wasn't hiding in shadows anymore. I could see her, and once you see a shadow for what it is, you can shine a light. I whispered Emily's name, I whispered my own, and then I said it out loud, for myself, for all of you listening. Miranda Torres will fall, because if she didn't, then every Emily after her would vanish too. I couldn't let that happen. The real battle was only just beginning. Do you know what it feels like to walk into your own house after everyone thinks you're dead? It's like stepping into a theater where the actors have already rehearsed your absence. My son, my daughter-in-law, and Miranda Torres, the puppeteer herself, sitting in my chair at the head of the table. The air was heavy, not with grief, with arrogance. They thought they owned it all now. I walked in slowly, my heels tapping against the marble floor. Every sound echoed like a warning shot. My son's face drained of color. My daughter-in-law gasped, clutching the armrest like she'd seen a ghost. And Miranda? She didn't flinch. She smiled. "Diana," she purred, her voice smooth as velvet. "What a surprise." I sat down across from her, calm, controlled, but inside my heart was pounding like war drums, because this was it, the moment we had planned for, the stage where the truth would finally corner them. I thought it was time we had a little renegotiation, I said, my tone light but my words sharp. After all, $3 billion is a lot of money, wouldn't you agree? Miranda leaned forward, her perfume heavy in the air. It belongs to those who know how to protect it. Her confidence was terrifying, but arrogance blinds, and in that blindness she revealed herself. I slid the folder across the table. Inside, carefully chosen papers, duplicates, bait, hospital transfers, adoption contracts, the kind of things only someone inside the system could have arranged. I watched her eyes flicker, recognition, ownership. "Impressive," she said, tapping her manicured nails against the folder. "But these are meaningless without me. You can't touch me." That's when I leaned in, lowering my voice. "Prove it." The silence fell. You could hear the hum of the chandelier above us. My son shifted uncomfortably. My daughter-in-law whispered something, but Miranda raised her hand to silence them. Her gaze locked on me, and then she did exactly what we needed her to do. She started talking. "You think I don't know how to cover my tracks? Those files exist because I let them exist. Emily's death, the baby's transfer, the doctor's silence, I orchestrated all of it. Without me, you'd have nothing but grief." Every word fell like a stone in a well, sinking deeper. She was confessing, and she didn't even realize. What she didn't know was that beneath the table, my small recorder was running. Every syllable etched into its memory. Every ounce of her pride weaponized against her, I let her talk. Sometimes that's all it takes. To give monsters the space to reveal themselves. Finally, I leaned back, pretending exhaustion. "Maybe you're right, Miranda. Maybe you're the only one who knows how this empire really works." She smirked, victorious. "Of course I am." And in that smirk, I saw it. The empire she thought she owned, starting to crumble. Because truth has a way of rotting the foundations of lies, I stood. My chair scraped loudly, a deliberate break in the tension. This isn't over, not by a long shot. And as I walked out, heart racing, recorder safe in my pocket, I thought to myself, this is only the beginning. Because if you think this was shocking, wait until you hear what happened next. The night before it happened, I couldn't sleep. I sat on the edge of Jake's worn-out couch, clutching the recorder in my palm like it was a lifeline. Every word Miranda had said, her arrogance, her confessions, was sealed in that tiny machine. My entire body hummed with one thought: tomorrow the world will know. When dawn broke, I felt something I hadn't felt in months: certainty. Do you know that strange calm right before a storm? That's where I was, calm but ready. We had arranged everything with the FBI. They had been skeptical at first. An old woman claiming she'd been shoved off a yacht, buried in a coffin, erased from existence. But evidence doesn't lie. And now the evidence wasn't just paper trails or whispers. It was Miranda herself, bragging about the crimes she'd hidden. That morning, the boardroom looked exactly as it had the last time I entered. Cold, glossy, built for power games. My son, my daughter-in-law, and Miranda were already seated, probably preparing their next move, their next lie. But this time the air carried something different, a shadow they couldn't see, but I could feel, because hidden microphones were planted, cameras tucked discreetly in corners. The FBI was watching from the van outside. I walked in with my head high, my voice steady. "Shall we begin?" Miranda smirked, like always, lips curling as if she owned the world. "Back again, Diana? You don't know when to quit." She had no idea. She was already finished. We talked in circles at first. Her confidence was unnerving. But the moment came. Her pride couldn't resist. She leaned forward, lowered her voice, and repeated the very words I had captured on tape. "Without me, Emily's death would have meant nothing. Without me, the baby's transfer would never have been seamless. I built this empire, Diana. Not you, me." Her words hung in the air like poison. And then, doors burst open. The sound of heavy boots hitting marble shattered the room. Agents in black stormed in, badges raised, guns drawn. "Miranda Torres, you are under arrest." The shock on my son's face, I will never forget it. He looked at me, wide-eyed, as if he had finally realized who he'd been dealing with all along, his mother, the woman they thought they had buried. Vanessa screamed, "This is a mistake. You can't do this." But the agents ignored her, snapping cold metal cuffs around her wrists. And Miranda? For the first time, her mask cracked. She froze, lips parted, eyes darting like a cornered animal. "You can't touch me. I have immunity. I have—" But the lead agent cut her off. "You have nothing. We have recordings. We have witnesses. It's over." Miranda. The room buzzed with chaos. My son shouted, insisting he knew nothing. Vanessa wept, her mascara streaking down her cheeks. But Miranda stayed silent now, her arrogance shriveled into fear. And me? I sat still, calm, watching the empire of lies collapse right in front of me. Do you know what relief feels like when it's laced with fury? It's a strange cocktail. My chest was heavy, but for the first time in so long, I could breathe. The agents gathered the evidence, files, hard drives, even Miranda's personal laptop. Every secret they had tried to bury was now unearthed. One agent turned to me, his tone firm but kind. "Mrs. Collins, your statement will be critical in securing convictions, but I promise you this: justice will be served." Justice. The word rang in my ears. After everything, being shoved into the ocean, erased on paper, mocked as insane, that word finally felt real. I looked at my son one last time. His eyes were filled, not with regret, but with panic. And that's when I realized something. Greed doesn't just blind, it rots. It rots the soul until nothing human is left. I stood, brushing invisible dust off my skirt, my voice steady. You buried me once, but today I bury your lies. The agents led them out, one by one, their empire in ruins. And as the heavy doors closed, I knew the fight wasn't finished, not yet, but the tide had turned. Because lies can build castles, but truth can blow them to pieces. Courtrooms have a smell, you know, a mix of polished wood, paper, and nerves. When I first stepped inside, it hit me like a memory from another life. The kind of life where I believed justice was just a word. But that day, sitting on the witness bench, I dared to believe it could mean something again. The trial drew crowds. Reporters filled every corner, their cameras flashing like lightning. Curious faces peered in through the glass. People love a scandal, especially one dripping with betrayal, money, and blood. But for me, this wasn't a spectacle, it was survival. Miranda sat across from me, her expensive suit crisp, her hair pulled back like steel wire. She still carried herself like a queen, but her eyes betrayed her. They darted, restless, calculating. My son and Vanessa were beside her, looking smaller than I had ever seen them. Do you know what it's like to watch your own child shrink into a stranger? That was me. The prosecutor began with the recordings. My heart pounded as Miranda's voice filled the silent room. Projected loud and clear. Without me, Emily's death would have meant nothing. Without me, the baby's transfer would never have been seamless. Close quote. Her own arrogance had built the gallows. I watched the jury, faces hardened. Some mouths fell open. There's a moment when people shift from doubt to certainty. You can see it in their eyes. That moment arrived with her words. Then came the witnesses. Mrs. Chen, trembling but resolute, describing the payments funneled through offshore accounts. Jake, holding up files that traced the $3 billion fund to shell companies Miranda controlled. And me, my voice breaking, as I told them how my son had stood still on that yacht while I was shoved into the sea. Every sentence felt like ripping a scar open. But I didn't stop, because silence is how evil survives. Miranda's defense tried to paint me as unstable, old, delusional. Isn't it true, her lawyer pressed, that you were diagnosed with cognitive decline? I looked straight at him. Isn't it convenient that my son declared me insane right after they staged my death? The courtroom murmured. Even the judge had a call for order. Days blurred into weeks, testimonies piled like bricks, building a wall Miranda couldn't climb. And then, closing arguments. The prosecutor stood tall, voice sharp. This was not just fraud, not just greed. This was murder. A 17-year-old mother dead, an infant trafficked like property, and an heir nearly erased. Miranda Torres and her accomplices treated human lives as transactions. Ask yourselves, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, if we do not stop them here, where will it end? The jury left. Hours crawled by. I stared at the ceiling, whispering prayers I hadn't prayed in years, and then the door opened. The foreman stepped forward. Guilty on all counts. The words thundered through me. My chest cracked open. Tears spilled before I could stop them. The judge's voice followed, heavy but steady. Miranda Torres, for conspiracy, fraud, and accessory to murder. You are sentenced to life without parole. Miranda's face finally shattered. Not rage, not pride, just fear. She sank back into her chair like the strings had been cut. And as for Jonathan Collins and Vanessa Collins, the judge continued, turning toward my son and daughter-in-law, for attempted murder, fraud, and conspiracy, you are sentenced to 25 years in federal prison. 25 years? My own son. I didn't cheer. I didn't clap. Relief isn't joy, it's release. It's air rushing back into lungs that thought they'd drowned. I caught his eyes as they led him away. For a split second, I searched for the boy who used to hold my hand in church, who once whispered that he'd protect me forever. But he was gone. In his place was a man who had chosen greed over blood. The gavel struck, court adjourned.
Outside, the world roared. Reporters, flashes, microphones shoved into my face. "Mrs. Collins, how do you feel?"
How do I feel? I wanted to say hollow, heavy, alive. Instead, I whispered, justice always finds the light. Because that's what mattered. Not me, not even my grief, but the truth finally carved into stone for the world to see. And maybe, just maybe, someone out there, watching, listening, would remember this trial not as a scandal, but as proof. Crime might buy silence for a season, but it can never buy freedom forever. They brought him to me on a rainy afternoon. I'll never forget the sound, the steady tap of water against the courthouse windows as the social worker walked in, carrying a bundle so small, so fragile, I almost didn't breathe. My knees went weak. For months I had fought in the dark, clawing at shadows, trying to bring light to crimes no one wanted to see. And now, here he was, the baby who had been nothing more than whispers in files, names in forged papers, bait in their evil scheme. Suddenly real. His eyes were closed, but his tiny fist curled restless, like he was already fighting to claim his place in this world. I reached out trembling, and when my fingers brushed his cheek, warm, soft, alive, I broke. Tears came before I could stop them. How do you even explain that kind of moment? It wasn't just a baby. It was proof that all the suffering had meant something. The social worker cleared her throat gently. "Mrs. Collins, you've been approved as his guardian." Guardian. The word wrapped itself around my heart. But it also carried weight. Could I do this again? Could I raise a child at my age? After everything? I looked at him, and I swear he opened his eyes just then, 2 little pools of searching blue. And in that instant, my answer was yes. I whispered to him, "You're safe now. You're mine." But there was one more thing, his name. In every document, he'd been called Robert Serra, cold, strange. Even the jurors had laughed at it under their breath. It was a name born from lies. He deserved more than that. I sat by the window that night, rocking him as the storm rattled outside. The name Sarah kept echoing in my mind, the young mother they had stolen him from. She was only 17. She never got to hold him, never got to sing him to sleep, but her love, her sacrifice, it lived on through him. So I decided his name would change, not to erase her, but to honor both of us, her courage and my promise. "From now on," I whispered, kissing his forehead, "you'll be Daniel. Daniel Collins. Daniel. A name that means God is my judge. And wasn't that the truth? Courts can give sentences, but only time and truth can heal. The first night, he wouldn't stop crying. I paced the house, humming lullabies I hadn't sung in decades. My voice cracked, but eventually, his cries softened. His chest rose and fell against mine, his tiny breath damp on my collar. Do you know what that feels like? To carry the weight of justice in one arm and the hope of the future in the other? That was me. And yes, I know what some of you might be thinking. How can an older woman start over? Isn't it too much? Maybe it is. But listen, I'd already been to the bottom of the ocean. I'd already died once. This child wasn't a burden. He was a resurrection. I thought of Jonathan, my son, in prison. Did he even know the baby was alive? Did he care? Part of me burned with anger, but another part whispered that this boy shouldn't inherit his father's sins. He deserved freedom from that shadow. Daniel Collins. A new life. A clean slate. And here's where I'll ask you, because I want you to picture it. If you were in my shoes, would you rename him too? Would you cling to the old poisoned legacy? Or would you dare to give him a future unchained from their lies? Tell me in the comments. I want to know what you would have done. Because for me, holding him in the quiet after the storm, there was no hesitation. Daniel wasn't just my grandson. He was my second chance, my reason to keep breathing, my proof that even after betrayal, life still gives us something worth protecting. 5 years. It feels like a blink and a lifetime all at once. Sometimes I wake up and forget the weight I used to carry. Other mornings, I still hear the ocean, dark, cold, the night I should have died. But then, I hear little footsteps pounding down the hallway, and Daniel's voice calling, "Grandma, breakfast!" And just like that, the ghosts fade. Life now, it's quieter, softer. My house used to echo with arguments. Slammed doors, secrets whispered in corners. Today, it smells of pancakes and crayons, and the only shouting is a 6-year-old pretending to be a superhero. I started keeping a journal. At first, it was therapy, scribbling down the nightmares, the betrayal, the way it burned to see my own son in handcuffs. But over time, the pages changed. They filled with Daniel's first words, his first bike ride, the first time he ran home from school waving a crumpled drawing like it was a masterpiece. He had drawn me with a cape. "Because you saved me," he said. "Do you know what that does to a heart that's been shattered?" Sometimes, though, I catch myself staring out the window, wondering if he'll ever ask about his parents, about the lies, the greed, the blood on their hands. What will I say? Do I tell him everything, or do I protect his innocence a little longer? I haven't decided. But here's the thing. I'm not living in fear anymore. That's the difference. For years, I walked with my shoulders hunched, waiting for the next betrayal. That is now I walk with my head high, holding a small hand that trusts me completely. Daniel loves the garden. We planted sunflowers last spring, and he insists they're taller because he talks to them every day. He kneels in the dirt, whispering secrets, and I laugh because I used to whisper my fears into the night. What a trade that is. Fear for hope, sorrow for joy. And yes, there are scars, I won't lie. Sometimes when he hugs me too tightly, I remember struggling for breath under the waves. Sometimes when I hear the word family, my chest aches with what I lost. But healing isn't forgetting. It's choosing to keep going, even when the memory stings. Let me ask you, have you ever thought your story was over, only to find out it was just a chapter? That was me. 5 years ago, I thought I'd spend my last days fighting shadows. Instead, I spend them reading bedtime stories about dragons and heroes to a boy who thinks I hung the moon. And I want to say this, especially to anyone listening who feels broken. Life does come back. Not in the same shape, not with the same faces, but it comes back. It surprised me too. As I write this, Daniel is asleep in the next room. The night is quiet. The world feels steady for once. And my heart, after everything, feels whole. Stay with me, because the last thing I want to share is the truth I learned, the message I hope will live longer than me. You know, after everything I've told you, the drowning, the lies, the courtroom, the quiet mornings with Daniel, I keep circling back to one truth. Respect can't be bought. And family, real family, isn't blood, it's choice. Lunny almost killed me, literally. My own son let me sink into the ocean for it. My daughter-in-law pushed me off that yacht because she thought a will meant more than a woman's life. And Miranda Torres? She built an empire of fear and silence, thinking power would last forever. But in the end, what remained? Bars on their windows, chains on their hands, silence in their cells. And me? I sit here, alive, free, with a little boy asleep upstairs who calls me Grandma. Tell me, which one of us won? I used to think revenge would be the sweetest closure, that if I saw them in court, heads bowed, guilty, I'd feel whole again. But the truth, justice is a relief, yes, but it's not the same as healing. Healing came from building something new, planting seeds in a garden with Daniel, hearing him laugh so hard he can't catch his breath, watching him grow into someone who knows love is real because I chose to show it to him every single day. Sometimes, late at night, I ask myself, what if I'd given up? What if I'd let the ocean take me, or let the lies bury me? He would have lost everything before he even had a chance to live. That thought alone is enough to make me grateful for every scar. So here's what I want to leave you with. If you take anything from my story, let it be this. You can survive betrayal. You can survive being erased, discarded, treated like you don't matter. And not only survive, you can build again, stronger, kinder, wiser. Have you ever been betrayed by someone you trusted the most? Have you ever wondered if you'd make it to the other side of the pain? I promise you, you can. I'm proof. Money can buy lawyers, yachts, even fake funerals. But it cannot buy loyalty, it cannot buy love. It cannot buy the sound of a child whispering, "Don't worry, Grandma, I'll protect you." Family is not who shares your blood. It's who shares your truth. Who stands with you when everything else falls apart? So I'll end with this question for you, because I want to hear your heart now. What would you do if your own family betrayed you for money? Tell me in the comments.